Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast, Creating an Integrated Digital Pathway for Sites and Sponsors. I'm Lisa Henderson, the Editorial Director of Applied Clinical Trials, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are pleased to bring you this webcast presented by Applied Clinical Trials and sponsored by Cognizant Life Sciences. I would like to share a statement from our sponsor. Cognizant's Life Sciences Business Unit partners with biopharmaceutical and medtech companies to develop strategies and apply solutions to healthcare challenges across the value chain. Their services and products include the Shared Investigator Platform, are digitizing interactions between sponsors and investigators across every phase, helping the industry subtract time from clinical development and add it to patient lives. And based in Atlanta, Georgia, Florence Healthcare is a global leader in remote connectivity and electronic document workflow management for clinical trials. More than 8,500 research sites in 34 countries, sponsors and CROs collaborate on the network. Florence solutions foster 25% faster clinical trial startup time, 40% reduced document cycle times, and enable more than 3 million remote monitoring activities every month. To learn more, you can visit them at www.florencehc.com. So we have some important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the small square icon in the upper right-hand corner of the window, or by hovering your mouse over the lower right-hand corner and dragging the window to the desired size. Your slides will advance automatically during the event. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the question mark help widget in the dock at the bottom of your presentation window. I would now like to introduce today's speakers. We are pleased to be joined today by Larissa Comas, Vishal Janani, and Ryan Jones. Larissa Comas is a clinical trial technology expert with nearly 20 years in the life sciences, healthcare, and software technology industries with a focus in oncology. She has worked with all constituents in the life sciences industry, including life sciences professionals, patients, doctors, nurses, and payers. Her work has included developing and implementing go-to-market strategies globally, including for Thomson Reuters Cortellis Clinical Trials Intelligence, and for Medidata Solutions, where she was Senior Director of Platform Strategy and Value. She has also worked with the National Cancer Institute on several national clinical trial technology initiatives, including working with investigators to select a national electronic data capture platform. Currently, Larissa is the product lead for the Cognizant Shared Investigator Platform. Larissa has a master's degree in journalism. Vishal Janani is an associate director within Cognizant's Life Sciences practice and is a product manager for the Shared Investigator Platform. In his role, he is responsible for the overall functional roadmap of the SIP platform and driving SIP adoption with pharma companies and investigative sites. Vishal is certified in pharmacovigilance and pharmacoepidemiology and has over 14 years of experience in software development, management consulting, defining strategic product roadmaps, and driving cross-functional teams to deliver IT solutions to optimize processes across the drug development lifecycle. And before co-founding Florence Healthcare, Ryan was president of PubGet, which was acquired by the Copyright Clearing Center. He started his career at Microsoft as product manager for Microsoft SharePoint, where he helped the web's largest sites make information understandable and accessible with document management technology. As CEO, Ryan leads Florence with the goal of advancing clinical research through software. Its electronic investigator site file helps over 8,500 research teams in 34 countries take back their day from paper, and its remote site access platform with remote monitoring and remote SEV capabilities drives site-sponsor collaboration and accelerates timelines. A frequent speaker, Ryan enjoys facilitating conversations between clinical research professionals in support of Florence's mission to advance research. So thank you all for joining us today. And Larissa, would you like to get us started?
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Larissa Comas, and I am the SIP product lead. And I'm really happy to be speaking with you today, along with our partner, Florence. And we're going to speak with you about how we've leveraged SIP and Florence to create an integrated digital pathway for sites and sponsors. So the agenda for today's webinar is we're going to give you some updates and an overview of the shared investigator platform as well as Florence, and speak with you a bit about some of the market trends and dynamics that we're seeing in clinical trials. And then we're going to talk about why we came together to solve specific site and sponsor challenges. And then we're going to share with you our new SIP EIF Connect powered by Florence module that we're launching shortly. And then talk a bit about why this connectivity is so important in the industry. And then speak a little bit about how what we're doing compares to other sponsor-driven technology portals. And then, last but not least, we'll give a brief demo of our combined application, and then take some questions from the audience. First, just to speak a bit about the shared investigator platform and the problems that it's solving and its evolution. So the SIP, as we call it for short, really has evolved out of sponsors coming together to solve some inefficiencies and that they saw in the investigator community. So on the left-hand side of the slide here, you'll see the current state or the pre-SIP state, which is investigators are asked by sponsors to connect to different systems repeatedly. They're asked by sponsors to share a lot of the same information over and over again. And so an investigator or the staff of an investigator at a site could conceivably log into, 60 or 70 different applications a day and share the same documents even within the same sponsors repeatedly if they are participating in multiple studies of the sponsors. And the result of that is a lot of wasted time and energy that not only keeps doctors and their staff away from patients, but also slows down clinical trials. And in some cases, some of these inefficiencies cause some investigators to do one study and then decide they just don't want to do any more. So the sponsors came together to create SIP so that they could eliminate a lot of those unnecessary redundancies. So if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, which is really the future state, which is the SIP state, where the investigators now have a single point of entry to share information with sponsors. The sponsors have come together collectively, which was at the time many years ago when SIP was really unique for sponsors to agree to share documents, to share information about investigators and their facilities, and also to harmonize on workflows. So it really has done a lot to reduce the burden on investigators. It's enabled investigators to leverage streamlined and harmonized processes across multiple sponsors in the industry, and it allows sponsors to reuse information about investigators and their facilities that they had to otherwise request repeatedly. So right now, SIP has 162,000 clinical researchers and site staff, and we have several different modules that all of these clinical researchers are using. There are shared aspects of SIP that include user profiles, facility department profiles, organization profiles, which are really the shared elements of SIP that the sponsors collaborate in and share across their different companies. Sites can establish pretty robust task and delegations so that sponsors can send documents automatically, having them mapped to the right site staff. There's a study workspace that every sponsor gets for every study that is private, of course, for each study and each sponsor. There's a survey capability that a lot of our sponsors leverage to cut down the amount of time needed to create, disseminate, and receive back from sites completed feasibility surveys. We have the payment API as well as many other APIs. We have an LMS application built into SIP that enables sponsors to offer sites training. We also, through our training module, enable sites to share training certificates across sponsors so that they can reduce the number of redundant trainings that they need to complete for different sponsors across different protocols. SIP also has the full document exchange capability, which is what is primarily connecting to Florence that you'll see more about later on in the presentation. And we have a full safety exchange module as well. So of those roughly 162,000 clinical researchers, 133,000 or so of them are site staff. The remaining are sponsor study team staff across 26,000 facilities and departments around the world. So the efficiencies of SIP are growing rapidly. Now we have close to 20,000 site users who are working across multiple sponsors and taking full advantage of all of the shared aspects of SIP, as well as we have generated nearly 400,000 common documents, which is a SIP terminology for some of the shared documents like CVs and 1572s. And then we have, through our document exchange capability, now shared more than 4 million documents across the platform, meaning sponsors have exchanged more than 4 million documents with the different sites that are on SIP. And you can also see from a safety notification distribution standpoint, we are close to distributing 37 million safety notifications across the world. And it really is testament to reducing the time it takes to get safety notifications out to sites. They can be acknowledged very quickly. So it's an enormous time saver and money saver for sponsors and a time saver for sites. We've had more than 75,000 training credits requested, meaning sites have asked for 75,000 different credits to be recognized across sponsors, which, as you can imagine, those are 75,000 trainings that may have had to been conducted, and many of them would have been redundant. So again, another great time saving for sites within SIP. So with that, I am going to turn the platform over to Ryan Jones to speak with you about Florence Healthcare. Ryan, over to you.
Thanks, Larissa. Great introduction of the progress SIP has made over the last several years, and we're super pleased to be part of the momentum that you've created. I'm Ryan Jones, CEO of Florence Healthcare. Over the last half a decade, we've been able to become the #1 electronic investigator site platform in research, and we'll give you a little context about what that is and what that means, and then how by partnering with Cognizant and the SIP platform, we feel like we can fulfill our shared vision of giving research sites their day back from paperwork by giving sites a tool that they can keep as part of any protocol that is launched with SIP. A little bit about Florence. Florence's flagship product is eBinders. We're the standard and the leader in electronic investigator site file. The electronic investigator site file replaces the site study binder that lives at the site both during the execution of the study as well as the long-term archival state that the study documents need to sit in. And as a result, it has both content creation technologies like form auto-completion, document routing, electronic Part 11 compliant signatures, but it also has collaboration, ultimately archival capabilities too. And Florence brings that to market through 3 products. We have an eTMF product that is the world's most advanced eTMF solution that incorporates a site space in the eTMF. Our eHub product, which allows sponsors to distribute an EISF or a site space out with any protocol they're working on, as well as coming soon in summer of this year, an eConsent platform. Those 3 products complement the core site tool, eBinders. All those products are based on the notion that if we can help sites solve their content creation problem, we can help sponsors access that content more efficiently and advance the pace of research as a result. Part of what allows us to do that is the fact that all of our tools were built with the site first in mind. So the research institutions that you see on the slide in front of you are those that contributed to the design of eBinders and our EISF, as well as those that have voted with your feet by deciding to standardize all of their work around our regulatory and source capture platform. As our network of sites grew past 8,500, it became standard for the most prolific sponsors in the life science industry to start collaborating with those sites through our platform. So these are the most active sponsors that work inside our EISF every month and are responsible for those 3 million document monitoring actions that take place across our network during that time. Let's shift gears and move away from that brief commercial about who the heck is Florence and what's an electronic investigator site file, while Larissa and I comment on what we're seeing out in the marketplace as a way to set the table for discussing the integration and collaboration between SIP and Florence. The first thing is that last year was a heck of a year. Not only did we all go through our own personal challenges with COVID and adjusting to how life is different, but at the time when clinical research was more important than ever, clinical research was challenged, and that was an access challenge to research sites. Bottom line is that the people, paper, and airplanes that were the glue that connected sites and sponsors together, that infrastructure ground to a halt. And as a result, Florence, Cognizant, sponsors, and sites came together to actively solve a common problem with renewed vigor, that site-sponsor connectivity. As part of our work to develop this partnership between Cognizant and Florence, we reached out to the marketplace with the industry survey in the beginning of 2021. And the first thing we looked at was how important is remote collaboration to your research organization. And what we found in 2019, only about 1 out of 5 monitoring visits were conducted using a remote technology. And that basically quadrupled in about 6 months' time as the industry reset to do things remotely, and nearly 80% of studies had a remote component to them. The second thing we dug into was looking at effectively a layer down. So we asked the question around where are you investing technology, both to sites, as you can see the top bar in each one of these graphs, as well as to sponsors. And the first thing we noticed is that because people traveling on airplanes and using paper was no longer a viable option, the industry was moving fast to increase their technology investment. In fact, we noticed one of the investment banks commented that $1 billion in travel budget shifted away from the travel industry and life sciences towards remote technologies during the second half of 2020. Just like, we'll never see a technology shift away from a traditional way of doing business like we in 2020 for the rest of our lives. The second thing we saw was that paper was the target for a lot of this transition, and that sites in particular were the place where the rubber meets the road, and that's where the transition that was taking place. I think the last thing I'll mention here is that we noticed that these bars are pretty similar when you look at the top bar versus the bottom bar across all 3. Both sites and sponsors We're investing in technology, both sites and sponsors. We're moving over, and both sites and sponsors are becoming comfortable with more advanced workflows using tech as a glue as opposed to paper as a glue. Larissa, does this resonate with what you were seeing out there working with the SIP-focused sponsors?
No, it absolutely does, for sure. The sites and the sponsors throughout 2020, I think after the first initial shock that the whole world went through, especially in the second half, really picked up their interest in adopting SIP and onboarding to SIP for sure.
Thanks. And the second half is a good transition because not only do we find balance between sites and sponsors in making this transition, but we also saw it not only in the second half of 2020, but also in the second half of workflows, if you look at the life cycle of a clinical trial. And that's what we're showing on the right-hand side of the slide. Again, we see both site and sponsor participation and cooperation at a similar level. Sites aren't dragging sponsors into this. Sponsors aren't dragging sites into this. But we do notice that as you go from feasibility all the way to data collection with monitoring in the middle, the interest in automating these processes and creating a digital bridge skewed towards the content consumption part of the process. Now that happened for two reasons. And by content consumption, I mean monitoring, patient data collection, as opposed to content creation, which sits more squarely in the feasibility and startup part of the process. That's a little bit because sponsors had historically controlled the technology platform. And what we're seeing post-COVID is that sites are getting more of a say and sponsors are becoming more responsive to sites' recommendations of what technology platform work for them. And I think what we'll see in 21, 22, and 23 is the stages of content creation earlier in the process will have a more marked shift towards technology. So where does that leave us and where do we go from here? I think what we see is that SIP is going to save a tremendous amount of time in reducing duplicate investigator database tasks so that the best sites can rise to the top, study startup gets accelerated. But it only solves a portion of the puzzle. Sites that don't have an EISF, and especially those that don't have an integrated EISF, are left scrambling to turn atoms into bits, to take paper processes or digital documents that are stored in infrastructure that can't be exposed to their sponsor partners and get them into SIP in a manual process. And as a result, that puts undue burden on the sites and prevents SIP from reaching the vision that I think we all hope it can reach. So what we set out to do was how can you provide to the site a piece of infrastructure that's theirs to keep, that becomes a permanent record for the study, so that there's a seamless connection between the content that the site has to create and maintain and the shared investigator platform. And that's what we'll discuss for the rest of our time together. So let's talk a little bit about the collaboration that focuses on these two different pieces of infrastructure, the shared investigator platform from Cognizant and the electronic investigator site file, which the site gets to keep in control from Florence. Larissa, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what Cognizant brought to the table as we were designing this collaboration and some of the things that influence Cognizant's point of view as we hook the two systems together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. Cognizant, as many of you may know, has 7 of the top 15 biopharmas standardizing, and as I talked about earlier, standardizing their workflows across SIP and harmonizing their processes across SIP and connecting with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of site users across tens of thousands of facilities. That consolidation of the sponsors in SIP and getting all of these sites onboarded onto SIP created an opportunity, as we saw it, to connect with Florence, which is the leading site-facing eReg binder platform on the market, for all of the reasons you see here. And I'll let Ryan speak to their market penetration. But really, it's bringing together really this consolidation of sponsors on an investigator platform, but then connecting it with the technologies that the sites are investing in with Florence. So maybe Ryan, you can speak a little bit to your side of the coin here.
We were lucky to have the DNA that was built into our tool from the footprint that you see on the right-hand side of the slide to think about how to start building this connection from the site side first. And looking at that specifically, we had 4 guiding principles for how to do this integration from the site side to create a new SIP module in concert with Cognizant. The first is to not disturb the streamlined site activation that is the hallmark of SIP. But then the second is to create a standardized folder structure that allows sites to control their electronic investigator site file and have it connect with the shared investigator platform in a way that's predictable and reduces duplicate effort. And part of that is having a bidirectional flow of documents. So as we'll demo in a few minutes, this means sponsors can send documents to sites. Sites can create documents in their own investigator site file and keep them there and send them the SIP where appropriate. And that sort of seamless connectivity is what in the early users of our system say reduces the overall burden. Larissa, maybe you could take us through with those principles in mind what the solution looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Ryan described, right, we had those as our guiding principles. I will say, you know, as you look at the slide that's up here now, right, you can see that there are these disconnected stepping stones that existed between the eTMF and the site files. And SIP was kind of in the middle there, right? And as the sponsors were standardizing on SIP as their investigator platform to connect with the sites, a lot of the sites were telling us that, you know, they still felt like they needed to connect SIP to their own systems. So it became pretty straightforward, right, that we wanted to take this disconnected set of processes and steps and connect them, which is why we came together with Florence to launch SIP EIF Connect. You know, maybe Ryan, you can speak a little bit more about the connection and the pathway we've created together.
Sure thing. So the principles we used in that connection were the 6 that you see on the screen here. They fall into a couple main categories, which is how do you automate content creation? And 2, how do you automate that consumption of content? The first principle was to keep the workflow the same sponsor to sponsor. And that is one of the mandates of SIP. One of the challenges we had is, well, a lot of the sites have standardized workflows that they have adopted for their SOPs. And so our decision was to allow sites to have control over sending documents that after they went through the standard operating procedures for their content creation. And that's what's highlighted in that second bullet. It allows the sites to use their own infrastructure, their own electronic investigator site file, which they get to keep either because they had a Florence system already or it was distributed as part of a SIP-enabled protocol so that that content can be created and live in the same place after that creation. The second category of guiding principles that we focus on is on the lower left-hand side of the slide. And this was about enabling remote monitoring where the documents live in the long term, rather than having to upload documents for monitoring purposes. An electronic investigator site file enables that. So just like we allowed some of the standardized sponsor workflows to exist in the beginning of the study startup process, that innate part of SIP, we let that innate part of the electronic investigator site file, which is let the monitors come into the site space to monitor, stand. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that we could eliminate duplicate work as much as possible. So no need to create documents in one system, download them, upload them to another system. Wherever the document is created, whether it's a 1572 that might be created in SIP or whether it's a delegation of authority log that might be created in Florence, it can move to the other environment in the click of a button. Larissa, do you want to talk about a little bit why this sort of connectivity matters to sponsors?
Yeah, absolutely. So, something that's really important in how we looked at this was that the sponsors, as I've said earlier, right, they created SIP specifically to harmonize and share information, but yet without this connectivity that we've created, the sites were still burdened with really taking information out of SIP and uploading it into their other systems. And so a lot of the categories you see here around remote monitoring and remote source access, storing documents, these things were very disconnected from what was happening in SIP. And SIP itself, right, we don't want to go ahead and recreate a whole site-facing e-regulatory binder platform, especially when there were something as strong as Florence was already, leading the market and making so much headway. So what we think we did coming together was really enable the sites to take advantage of all of the capability that's already in Florence, as well as having the sponsors be able to do the same, right? The sponsors can still continue their remote monitoring in Florence, and Florence is still the long-term storage of documents on the site side, but all of the aspects of harmonization across the sponsors can still be leveraged within SIP, and it really does, SIP becomes a place where you can kind of have a single source of truth between what's happening on the eReg binder side and then what's being passed across through SIP to the eTMF. So it really allows the sponsors to continue to take advantage of the investment that they've made in and sharing of documents in SIP, but also allows the sites to take advantage of the investments that they've made in Florence while using SIP as a conduit to both share information as well as harmonize across workflows and really kind of be that single source of truth between the two systems. So we want to talk a little bit now about how this is different from other sponsor-driven technology portals, of which there are more and more up. Maybe Ryan, you can talk a little bit about why things fail for sites, and then I can pick up on when things fail for sponsors and how what we're doing, addresses those failures.
Sure. There's two challenges for sites. One is when solutions are built for the sponsor in mind, and sites have to switch context as they move from working with one sponsor to the next, and an environment is foreign to them. And that's been, unfortunately, the case for site or investigator portals for too long. Related yet different is the idea that sites can't standardize their workflows on one platform, which you see in the bottom left of the slide, and therefore they can't create efficiencies in the tools that really are about the business that they're running, their study startup processes, their monitoring processes. And so sponsors that distribute a tool that's an add-on to one of their internal tools, such as an add-on to their eTMF, they miss providing sites an opportunity to own and control a piece of infrastructure. And that's damaging not only because of the workflow disruption that I described here, but if you look at ICHE 6, the regulatory requirement that sites control the staging area, the long-term storage area for the documents that they create. And so that can set the site and the sponsor up for failure from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah. And on the sponsor side, right, their systems are only going to work if the sites adopt them, right? And we're really happy on the SIP side that we've had such successful site adoption over the last couple of years. But the sites have made their own investments, like we've talked about throughout this presentation, in their own technology platforms. And there really needs to be a way to connect what the sites are doing and what the sponsors are doing. And another reason is the workflows, right? I've talked a lot about sponsors harmonizing workflows across SIP, and they do offer those harmonized workflows to sites, right? So sites have, fewer workflows to learn and to understand, but they have their own workflows that they've created. And so us coming together really allows for sites to leverage all of the great work they've done in Florence. And we can connect those workflows to SIP and therefore to the sponsor workflows as well. And sites don't own the EISF space. The sponsors have to go into the systems, and they have to conduct their own activities in the systems. And so we think it makes a lot of sense for sponsors as well as for sites. If the site side of this equation is really owned and driven by a truly site-centric platform like Florence, and can connect to the SIP platform that is also built on site centricity, but the Florence system actually is built way beyond what the SIP connection is, as you've heard Ryan talk about, and has a lot of other downstream impacts on the site that, a sponsor built or sponsor driven system just doesn't have to the extent that Florence does. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vishal Janani, who's going to go through a demonstration, prototype of our SIP EIF Connect powered by Florence.
Thanks, Ryan and Larissa. Hi, everyone. This is Vishal. I'm the product manager at Cognizant for Shared Investigator Platform. Over the course of next 10 minutes, I will give you a quick demonstration of our integrated solution to showcase how it simplifies for the sites their management of Florence eBinders, as well as improves collaboration between a sponsor and a site. As part of our demonstration, we'd go through three key scenarios that would establish this. The first one is more of the configuration. So how do you as a site or as a sponsor enable this integration for your study? So you'd see, and it's a quick UI-based configuration that would allow you to connect the two systems. Then we'll go through a scenario where how would you as a site or collaborate when a sponsor sends a document from their eTMF, what the interactions would be. And what this demonstrates and showcases is you no longer have to download and manually upload the document, an approved version of a sponsor shared document to your eBinder, a Florence eBinder. The integration would automatically do so, thereby simplifying how a site could manage their Florence eBinder and make sure that they have the latest and the greatest document. The last scenario is more of many times what we've heard from sites is they already have documents that are being requested by the sponsors in their eBinders, and how through a click of a button you can share a document which exists in your eBinder to a sponsor via SIP. Let's jump into the demonstration. I'll switch my screens a little bit and I'll give you context of those. So pardon me if you see multiple jumps between different screens. What you see over here right now is a typical SIP interface. I've logged in as a dummy sponsor user, Sarah, from an organization or a pharma company called Curie. As a first bit to configure the integration as a sponsor with the adequate roles, you would go ahead and have under the admin, go to the SIP EIF Connect configuration, and then specify what kind of study or which study you would like to enable the integration for. I would go ahead and identify the study category. I'll identify the countries and the sites within those countries that need this integration to be enabled. So from a sponsor user perspective or from a pharmaceutical company perspective, this is all that you need to do once you have subscribed to the SIP EIF Connect solution as a sponsor user. At the same time, and I'll switch my screen again to a different view. And many of you at the sites would be familiar with the Florence interface and your teams. So at the site user, so once the sponsor has done their bit of configuration at the site, a Florence admin at your site can go ahead and under the settings, go to your team settings. For the selected team, you can go ahead and you would see an additional option now in addition to the original options of team profile and team studies, you would have a SIP configuration. Click on that and you would create a new configuration. The information that is requested out here would be provided to the admin through our SIP support request, and we would share that information with you. So in this case, I would just go ahead and add the information as our test. And create that integration. So a quick two-step process, one which is completed by the sponsor or the pharma company. The other one at the site as your Florence admin would go ahead and establish this. With these two actions, now your site is enabled and the SIP EIF Connect should be live at your site. Going back to our use case. So now once this is live, what does it help with? Let's assume that we have a sponsor user. I'll switch back to my sponsor user. Go to the sponsor. You are familiar with the interface of SIP. Go to your study documents. And let's say I'm requesting a protocol signature page from the site. As a sponsor, they would go ahead and start the workflow. Select the necessary actions required. And say I would want this as an acknowledgement. Add the relevant recipients based on what you need to. And send the task to the site users. So this action is of a sponsor sharing a protocol signature page with the site. What you see over here, and this is Suzanne, who is a site user. On their SIP interface as a site, you would see a task which is outstanding for you that the sponsor is requesting your signature on a protocol signature page. Familiar to how you navigate and work with SIP in a quick and easy way, you click on the document. It opens up the document which the sponsor has shared with you on SIP. You enter your user ID and password for eSignature. And that practically renders an eSignature which is ready, and you can send this back. So what you would see is a rendition of the eSignature. And submit your action back to the sponsor. And that completes the site action. The two things happen. One is the sponsor would now receive the document for review and verification. So as a sponsor, I would go ahead and click through this, claim the task and say this document is approved. I agree that the signature is accurate and approve the document. Now what this does is it approves the document from a sponsor perspective, but this is where our integration kicks in. It recognizes that there is an approved document which is available for the site now. It picks this document up, and if I were to switch the view for the site user, go to my binders to the study, it would actually give you the actual document right here. So it has simplified and it has eliminated the need for the site to physically download the document from a sponsor portal or SIP in this case and upload it to their Florence eBinder. And as you see, the document over here would have the same eSignature rendition. It would also have the audit trail associated with it. So it is a compliant document, and you can actually maintain your eBinder easily through this approach. So that's your scenario 2, where you are actually working with the sponsor, collaborating with the sponsor on the SIP side, working through the various workflows. And then once the document is approved, it automatically sends it and keeps a copy of it in your Florence eBinder. The other scenario is when, let's say, you have a particular document which you would like to share with the site. In this case, let me just go ahead and pick up the document. Sorry about that. Just go ahead and take the document. And let's say if you have the document with you, all you need to do is right at the top, you would see an additional option with the option to send it back to SIP. So you can actually share that document with the SIP directly from this view. And at the sponsor level, once the document is shared, they would directly see the document right here as it's in site review. So right from your screen in Florence eBinder, you are now at a click of a button able to share the document with the sponsors through the SIP integration. So that's pretty much what I wanted to highlight in terms of the three scenarios or the three key areas which the integration would bring forth. Like I said, the purpose over here is to kind of simplify how sites manage and maintain their Florence eBinder. It automates a lot of those manual activities that currently the sites have to do in terms of extracting the documents from SIP and pushing it to the Florence eBinder. And at the same time, provide a quick interface for them to share documents from their Florence eBinder to the sponsor via SIP. So with that, I'll hand it back to Larissa and Ryan.
Thank you very much, Vishal. And now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar and see what questions have come in from the audience.
That's right, Larissa. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ryan and Vishal, for your presentations. Before we get started on the question and answer session, I just want to remind the audience how to submit questions. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of the presentation window. So let's go take a look at those. And our first question is, do sites have to pay for using Florence?
We'll take a swing at that, Larissa. Yeah, good question. There are two ways that a site can use Florence. One is they can decide it is their EISF for all their studies, in which case the financial relationship is between Florence and the sites. They pay us for its use, and they get reimbursed by their sponsor partners across all the studies conducted at that site. That's option A. And then option B will be more common in what we're talking about here with the shared investigator platform, where the sponsor pays for the tool as part of the protocol that they're working on with the site. So when they launch the protocol, the site gets SIP, and the site also an electronic investigator site file from Florence that is theirs for use during the study, as well as to become the system of record for archiving after the study.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. And our next question is, how do you initiate this integration?
Sure. Let's talk about how we're rolling out, and then Larissa, other color. Sorry, I jumped in here. I think for the first rollout of this collaboration, it's initiated on the sponsor side. We'll be, from Florence's point of view, we'll be rolling out a chapter 2 where the site can initiate a connection if the site's already a Florence customer. So that's my swing at it. Larissa, do you have more color?
Yeah, sure. So as Ryan said, right, this is going to be offered through SIP as a new module that sponsors would provide to sites for specific studies. If, obviously a site who's interested can contact either their Florence contact or their SIP contact to, if they want to ask more questions about it. But it really is going to be a sponsor-driven initiation.
Great. Thank you, Larissa, and thank you, Ryan. Our next question, what is the thought on the future of studies for sites that are already using a different e-reg system?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this, and then maybe Ryan, see if you want to add anything. So obviously, we've made a deep connection between SIP and Florence, and there is an opportunity for sites using other platforms to potentially connect their API to SIP through their technology partner. But what we've done with this integration is eliminated the need for sites to go on sort of a site-by-site basis, right? That's why this is really being driven on a study level, sponsor level, and can be rolled out very quickly across sites. Even if they don't already have Florence, they can actually be provided access to this through their sponsor for that specific study that they are going to conduct for that particular sponsor.
Our next question. Can an investigator log into SIP with Florence credentials using single sign-on?
It's an easy yes. There's going to be single sign-on between SIP and Florence.
Yeah, part of the value that we wanted, if you boil this all down to what's the thing to walk away from, is electronic investigator site files have their role in terms of being the system of record of the site, and SIP has its role in terms of being the conduit between the sites and sponsors. And a big part of that value is to reduce the switching costs switching between EISF and SIP at the site level. Single sign-on is a big part of that. And this two-way document flow that Vishal demonstrated is another big part of that.
Thank you for that. And our next question, are there sponsors that are already evaluating this new capability?
Yes, there are several of the SIP sponsors already evaluating the capability, and many others that we're speaking with are interested in this as well.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Larissa. Thank you, Ryan, for your insights on the Q&A. And thank you, Vishal, for that excellent demo. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'd also like to thank the audience for attending and for participating in today's event. If we did not answer your question live, be assured that the speakers will get back to you offline. And I would also like to thank our sponsor, Cognizant Life Sciences, for making today's educational webcast possible. We would also like to ask everyone in the audience to participate in a brief survey. You can see the survey to the right of your screen. You will receive an email alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay, and we invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. So thank you all again for joining. We will see you next time. Take care.